Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Chris Wallace in for Bret Baier. President Trump is calling U.S. economic growth amazing after the fastest expansion in almost 4 years. The gross domestic product for the second quarter of this year grew by 4.1%, but that did not rule the day on Wall Street. The Dow lost 75. The S&P 500 was off 19. NASDAQ plunged 115. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Deirdre Bolton is in New York and has analysis behind the numbers. But correspondent Peter Doocy starts us off from the White House with good economic news for the country and the president. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Chris. President Trump said tonight the economy, the GDP, grew 4.1% because of Republican efforts to rewrite the tax code and reduce regulations. And he thinks that once new trade deals are finalized, today's strong report will just look like a stepping stone.
We're on track to hit the highest annual average growth rate in over 13 years.
In the shadow of the White House today, the president took credit for good economic news and insisted that new tariffs will not reverse the trend.
I happen to think we're going to do extraordinarily well in our next report, next quarter. I think it's going to be outstanding. I won't go too strong because then if it's not quite as good, you'll not let me forget it.
A few miles away from the South Lawn at Reagan Airport, the special counsel Robert Mueller crossed paths with Donald Trump Jr. today. Politico published a photo of Mueller reading the paper and Trump Jr. on the phone. The special counsel's office says Mueller didn't interact with Trump Jr. and wasn't aware he was standing there. Michael Cohen apparently wants to meet with Mueller now. The president's former personal attorney apparently wants to tell Mueller that his former client, Donald Trump, did have advance knowledge of an infamous meeting between Trump Jr. and a group of Russians offering dirt on the Clinton campaign, as CNN first reported. Earlier this year, Steve Bannon told Michael Wolff in Fire and Fury he thought that, quote, the chance that Don Jr. did not walk these jamos up to his father's office on the 26th floor is zero. But Trump Jr. has long said he never briefed his dad, not even after the meeting.
It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
That's a claim the president has corroborated. Today, President Trump pushed back on Cohen's claims, and a New York Times report that the special counsel is scrolling through the president's Twitter feed to see if negative statements about James Comey or Jeff Sessions obstructed justice. The president writes in part, I did not know of the meeting with my son, Don Jr. Sounds to me like someone is trying to make up stories in order to get himself out of an unrelated jam. Taxi cabs, maybe? He even retained Bill and Crooked Hillary's lawyer. Gee, I wonder if they helped him make the choice. Now the president's new lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, is trying to introduce doubt about Cohen's credibility.
Number one, he lied to people about taping them, both the president and other people. And not only that, he went to subterfuge in order to do it, like a whole little game, which shows how pathological he is.
This afternoon, the president hosted a high-level meeting about midterm election security and separately told Sean Hannity in a radio interview, once the midterms are 60 days out, he will campaign 6 or 7 days a week for more than 24 Republicans.
We have to get a group together. Give me the top 25 Congress people that are, could go either way. And I want to go out and campaign for those people.
We have brand new details just minutes old from inside the president's midterm election security meeting. The White House press secretary says the president has made it clear that his administration will not tolerate foreign interference in our elections from any nation state or other malicious actors. We also have a new update about the president's social schedule. Remember, earlier this week, the National Security Advisor John Bolton said the White House was going to push back President Putin's visit to Washington until after the Mueller probe wrapped up. Well, Putin went ahead and invited the president to Moscow today. Sarah Sanders says the president is open to going to Russia, but apparently the White House just needs to see some sort of a formal invitation before they can RSVP. Chris?
Peter Doocy with a very full day at the White House. Peter, thank you. I will have an exclusive interview with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and also talk with President Trump's lawyer Rudy Giuliani this weekend on Fox News Sunday. Check your local listings for times. Let's get more now on today's strong economic numbers. Deirdre Bolton of Fox Business Network joins us from New York. Good evening, Deirdre.
Good evening, Chris.
Let me just ask you.
4.1% headline was great, right? I mean, it got rave reviews from economists and the president. After that report, President Trump predicted annual growth of 3% or better for the rest of the year. The U.S., by the way, is now a $20 trillion plus economy, the first time a country has hit that milestone. One of the strongest parts came from net exports. Recent trade actions by the Trump administration have pushed up prices for some U.S. goods. Steel and aluminum are examples. The export number added 1 percentage point to GDP. Consumer spending also strong in the second quarter. It's 2/3 of our economy, so it certainly moved the needle. This was the first full quarter that investors could see the effects of the Trump administration's tax plan, the one that was voted into place in December 2017. Here's the director of the National Economic Council.
Low inventory, strong cap spending will carry us, for several more quarters, for heaven's sakes. We used to do this, you know.
So, Chris, there are longer-term questions about sustainability. Chris.
So, Deirdre, if the GDP number was so strong today, and it was, why did the markets close down?
There was this shadow of question about sustainability. So one economist, for example, Ian Shepherdson at Pantheon Macroeconomics, he talks about this years-long slowdown in productivity that he says may eventually curb economic growth. But really, the big pressure came from tech. Traders say that tech sentiment hurt the market's performance because tech stocks have been our superstars. They've been this huge, strong part of the current 9-year bull market that we're in. And some say, listen, these stocks are priced for perfection. No company is ever run perfectly, and stumbles are showing up in a dramatic way. So Twitter, 20% drop. That's a great example. It reported earnings that matched forecasts, but it said the number of monthly active users fell. That was a surprise, and the company also warned of further weakness. So that percentage size drop and the declining monthly active users, that reminded some investors of Facebook. Facebook also referenced stalling user growth at the same time that it committed to spending more. That stock fell 19% on Thursday, a little bit more today. Facebook saying it is going to be investing billions of dollars per year on developing stronger privacy measures. The company, of course, facing bruising headlines about enabling fake news and election meddling. Some analysts see the decisions as costly and necessary, but certainly not good for the stocks. Chris.
Deirdre, thank you. There are not a lot of likes tonight when it comes to Facebook's stock plunge after Thursday's 19% drop. The big question is, was that just a blip or the start of something more serious? Here is correspondent Jillian Turner.
I think that there are a number of areas of content that we need to do a better job policing on our service.
It's been 3.5 months since Mark Zuckerberg admitted to lawmakers on Capitol Hill that Facebook's in need of some major security and privacy upgrades. Since then, public pressure has mounted for the company to rein in bots, fake accounts, extremists, and terrorists roving freely on its platform.
They have over 2 billion monthly active users. That's a significant number of people and a lot of data to manage.
This week, the costs of what tech experts call a decade of lax standards have caught up and cost the company $119 billion in market capital in a single day.
Now, it's up to the users of Facebook to decide whether they want to stay on the platform or not. Ultimately, I think Facebook has come under pressure in the marketplace.
But in a conference call Wednesday, both Zuckerberg and CFO David Werner told shareholders they're not backing down from new commitments, however expensive they may be.
As I've said on past calls, we're investing so much in security that it will significantly impact our profitability.
But it's not just security infrastructure that's got a steep price tag.
It's also paying for national advertising to try to convince us that they are making that change.
Facebook's 2018 priorities include offering users more privacy-setting options, more power and choice over ads, and this.
We're going to have more than 20,000 people working on security and content review.
This is especially crucial for the midterm elections, now just a few months away. Conservative candidates and their supporters are already frustrated about bias and censorship.
Facebook's got to navigate this very carefully because no matter what side you are on, there's chances are that you're going to be pointing your finger at the company saying they're doing things unfairly.
A Facebook rec tells Special Report the company's leaders have a four-pronged strategy for midterms focused on the fighting foreign interference and fake accounts and making ads more transparent. Also, in a nod to the 2016 presidential elections, they're taking on fake news, or as they call it, false news. Chris?
Jillian, thank you. Philadelphia will stop giving U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement access to its arrest database. Democratic Mayor Jim Kenney says ICE misuses the information to target people who are in the country illegally but are not accused of any other crimes. Kenney says the agency's actions have created fear and distrust in the city's immigrant community and made it more difficult for police to solve crimes. No reaction yet from ICE or the White House. The National Transportation Safety Board says recordings recovered from the sunken tour boat that went down last week at a Missouri lake indicate a fast change in the weather before the fatal accident. 17 people died. 9 of them were from a single family. Funerals for 4 of them were held today in Indiana. 5 other members of that family will have funerals tomorrow. There is growing concern tonight about China's long-term goals. American intelligence officials worry Beijing has its sights set on replacing the U.S. as the top economic and military superpower. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge looks at the evidence.
The president, again, would like to repeat that there was no collusion.
While the news cycle remains fixated on Russian election meddling, in recent days, the nation's top intelligence officials have warned China is rising at a national security conference.
We have economic espionage investigations in every state, all 50 states, that trace back to China.
But the long-term threat is clearly China. That's the strategic competitor that we look to because the economic power of that country, the size, its ambitions.
During a Senate confirmation hearing.
Consistent with the rest of the intelligence community right now, I believe China is one of our biggest focus areas. It certainly should be in terms of the threat now and the threat looking into the future.
Experts describe the Chinese government's strategy as ambitious and designed to dominate robotics and artificial intelligence by acquiring or stealing American secrets. This nondescript high-rise in suburban Shanghai houses Unit 61398. The Chinese military unit is blamed for some of the most aggressive and organized cyber attacks. This week, the debate reached a Senate panel where the U.S. Trade Representative defended tariffs against an aggressive China.
If your conclusion is that China taking over all of our technology and the future of our children is a stupid fight, then you are right. We should capitulate. My view is that's how we got where we are. So I don't think it's a stupid fight.
And it goes beyond the threat of intellectual property to expanding its physical reach through the island dispute in the South China Sea.
You see them spreading their influence, whether it's the Coral Islands or whether it's strategic ports and so forth. They've got a long-term strategy.
The Director of National Intelligence, who oversees the 16 agencies, emphasized that the U.S. must decide whether China is a true adversary or a legitimate near-peer competitor, adding in the short term, Beijing must understand that the U.S. will no longer tolerate the theft of American secrets. Chris.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
The Environmental Protection Agency is withdrawing an order by the agency's former chief that lifted sales limits on heavy-duty, high-polluting, remade diesel truck engines. EPA Chief Scott Pruitt issued that rule in his last days in office before resigning earlier this month amid ethics scandals. His interim replacement withdrew the order yesterday. The so-called glider trucks are said to emit many times more pollutants than new trucks on the market. Up next, North Korea apparently makes good on a promise to return U.S. war remains. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in New York, shareholders of 21st Century Fox and the Walt Disney Company approved Disney's $71 billion purchase of Fox's film and television entertainment assets. Disney's cash and stock offer has already been approved by U.S. regulators. 21st Century Fox is the parent company of Fox News Channel. Fox 32 in Chicago, where the city agrees to carry out police reforms under federal court supervision. Illinois Attorney General Lisa Madigan sued the city last year with the support of Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from Fox 29. The big story there tonight, 2 popular amusement parks in central Pennsylvania reopen after flooding forced them to close for several days. Hershey Park and Knoebels welcome customers today. Some rides and attractions are still closed while workers clean up from the flooding. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. Korea's Kim Jong-un for returning what are supposed to be the remains of several dozen American military personnel missing since the Korean War. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott looks at the latest sign of progress in the previously icy relations between the two nations.
Finally coming home, what's believed to be the remains of 55 U.S. service members killed and missing in the Korean War were returned today to a U.S. air base in South Korea. They were picked up from North Korea via an Air Force transport plane. The case is draped in UN flags, the commanding force during the war. Their return was a pledge by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the summit in Singapore last month with President Trump.
But I want to thank Chairman Kim in front of the media for fulfilling a promise that he made to me, and I'm sure that he will continue to fulfill that promise as they search and search and search.
The remains will be examined to make sure they're the real thing. The North has substituted some in the past, but today's transfer prompted officials to say U.S. troops might help alongside North Koreans to search for thousands more there in the future.
When you have that sort of communication going on, it sets a positive environment, a positive tone for other things.
This was the 65th anniversary of the armistice, which ended the fighting in the Korean War. The day marked by ceremonies along the tense DMZ separating North and South Korea. It was also marked in North Korea. There, it's Victory Day. There's no victory yet in efforts to smooth relations between the North and the U.S. The Trump administration needs more results on denuclearization.
This is where progress starts. I mean, it's not the end of the game by any means, but it's important that we're making those steps.
Important as well to those directly involved, like the son of Captain John Henry Zimmerly, whose plane went down in 1952 over North Korea and has been missing ever since.
We want to see some results. We want the remains to be identified. I'm sorry, we want our family members to come home.
The remains are set to be transferred next Wednesday to Hawaii for what could be a lengthy final identification process. Among those set to attend, Vice President Pence. His father also served in the Korean War. Chris.
Greg, thank you. President Trump will posthumously award the Medal of Honor to the family of a fallen U.S. Air Force Special Tactics Combat Controller on August 22nd. The medal nomination for Technical Sergeant John Chapman says he distinguished himself on the battlefield through conspicuous gallantry, sacrificing his life to preserve those of his teammates. Chapman was part of a joint special operations reconnaissance team deployed to Afghanistan in 2002 that came under overwhelming enemy fire during a heroic rescue attempt. In tonight's Whatever Happened To segment, President Trump's military parade here in Washington. It is shaping up to be something a little different than originally planned. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin tells us where things stand right now.
The date is set, Saturday, November 10th, one day before Veterans Day. But the military parade in Washington may not be what President Trump had in mind when he watched French fighter jets and tanks parading down the Champs-Élysées in Paris last summer, sparking his idea to honor America's veterans. Language in the Defense Authorization Act passed in Congress this week prohibits forces from taking part that may be needed for war. Quote, to ensure that veterans and those currently serving remain the parade's focus and that efforts to restore readiness are not slowed, the NDAA prohibits the use of operational units or equipment in the parade if the Secretary of Defense believes such use will hamper readiness. The money will come from the military's operations and maintenance budget, according to the Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee.
It says if any operational units are used, then Secretary Mattis has to certify that it will not affect readiness.
The Pentagon's top officer has assigned U.S. Northern Command, based in Colorado, tasked with protecting the homeland, to pull it off. Initial guidance in March called for, quote, honoring the history of the U.S. military starting from the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812 to today, and coincide with the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. It's not clear now how much the parade will cost taxpayers.
I've seen various different cost estimates from between, I think, 10 million and 30 million, depending on the size of the parade.
Almost exactly the same amount that those war games President Trump scrapped with South Korea, saying doing so would save the taxpayer a lot of money.
The bill tries to make sure this parade is focused on the men and women who have served and really tailor it towards the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, but also give an opportunity to honor those veterans who never had a parade, like those who fought in Vietnam, those who have fought in Iraq and Afghanistan more recently.
The D.C. City Council was concerned roads would be damaged with heavy armaments rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue. A spokesman for the U.S. Northern Command said, at this time, we do not intend to use tanks in the parade. Chris?
Jennifer, thank you. Up next, why a Democratic senator from Indiana is in a tough spot as he campaigns for re-election. First, beyond our borders tonight, Israeli troops are searching the West Bank village of a Palestinian teenager who broke into a settlement home and stabbed 3 Israelis. One of those victims is dead. The 17-year-old attacker was shot and killed at the scene. The military has detained 4 Palestinians for questioning. Officials in Pakistan say efforts are underway to form a coalition government following this week's voting. The country's election commission has declared the party of former cricket star Imran Khan to be the winner, but since it did not get a majority, the party must seek help to form a government. And German authorities say a forest fire near a village southwest of Berlin is under control, but the situation remains dangerous because of unexploded World War II ammunition buried in the ground. A German news agency says some of the munitions may already have detonated in the fire, and the safety of firefighters may be at risk. Just some of the other stories. Indiana Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly said earlier this week he will meet with President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court next month. Donnelly is just the 2nd Democratic senator to agree to speak with Brett Kavanaugh, and his decision reflects the tough spot he's in as he seeks re-election this fall. Senior correspondent Mike Tobin explains tonight from Valparaiso, Indiana.
Indiana's incumbent Senator Joe Donnelly is one of those red state Democrats up for re-election who's in a pinch over President Trump's pick for the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh.
How you doing?
Mike Braun, the Republican challenger, is in a comfortable position as his opponent is now caught between the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who vowed to fight the Kavanaugh confirmation, and the will of Hoosier voters, who voted overwhelmingly by 19 points in favor of President Trump.
I think it's tough when you belong to a party like Joe does, where he'd like to vote otherwise, but he's got to check with Chuck Schumer on every vote.
But Donnelly voting for Kavanaugh would not come as a complete surprise. He is a pro-life Democrat, and he voted to confirm Trump's earlier pick, Neil Gorsuch. Now he's under pressure, even on Indiana's airwaves, to do the same for Kavanaugh.
Will Senator Joe Donnelly cave to the extreme left or confirm a new justice and protect our rights?
The story remains the same.
Conservative Indiana radio host Todd Huff says his listeners want Donnelly to give Kavanaugh an unbiased look, absent of politics.
People are tired of this vitriol, and I think folks want a fair hearing for this guy. And when you hear the Democrats come out and say, we're against this guy without even knowing who he is.
With the race neck and neck, Indiana voters think Donnelly will need to cast the Trump-friendly vote.
I think he's going to have to disappoint his party and vote in favor of the nominee. And then we'll see where the chips fall, because he still could lose in November.
Donnelly thus far has been non-committal on this sensitive vote, releasing only a statement saying he will take the same approach he did for the last Supreme Court vacancy, adding that he, quote, will carefully review and consider the record and qualifications of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Most Senate Democrats have been refusing the customary meeting with Judge Kavanaugh, demanding Republicans produce paperwork about his past beforehand. Senator Donnelly went ahead and scheduled that meeting anyway. The Mike Braun campaign accused him of caving to pressure. Chris, back to you.
Mike Tobin reporting from Indiana. Mike, thank you. Breaking news tonight from the West Coast. The Associated Press reports at least 125 homes have been destroyed in a deadly Northern California wildfire, and 2 firefighters have died in that blaze. Correspondent Jeff Paul has the latest tonight from Los Angeles.
We need to get out and
be safe.
A firestorm in Northern California taking down everything in its path.
There's a big wall of fire.
Hundreds of residents desperate to get out as the massive car wildfire burning near the western edge of Redding, California, grows bigger and more unpredictable.
It got very red. We could see the flames, and we thought we just need to get out of here.
The car fire claimed the life of a bulldozer operator and a City of Redding firefighter overnight Thursday. Over 44,000 acres burned at only 3% containment, and dozens of homes are now destroyed as firefighters plead with residents to listen to their warnings.
What we tell people in situations like this is don't wait for the knock on the door, don't wait for the phone call. If you feel threatened, leave.
Moving south, crews work to tame the Ferguson fire. Smoke from that fire shutting down nearby Yosemite National Park.
When we came out to the car yesterday, there was like almost a layer of ash on it. I noticed, all along the rim of the windows.
And in Southern California, outside of Palm Springs, investigators believe the Cranston fire, burning at over 11,000 acres, was intentionally set. Authorities in Riverside County today charging a 32-year-old man with 15 felony arson counts related to 9 separate fires. Residents there are thankful for all the firefighters who are risking their lives to protect families and hopefully their homes.
If it weren't for them, we'd be gone. I believe that. It's really, really devastating this time.
With an expected forecast of extremely hot and dry conditions, firefighters feel there is no relief in sight. They say these large, fast-moving and devastating wildfires are the new normal and are only increasing in size and severity. Chris?
Jeff Paul reporting from California. Jeff, thank you. President Trump celebrates surging economic numbers on the heels of his trade agreement with Europe.
I am thrilled to announce that in the second quarter of this year, the United States economy grew at the amazing rate of 4.1%. We're on track to hit the highest annual average growth rate in over 13 years. As the trade deals come in one by one, we're going to go a lot higher than these numbers.
A pumped-up President Trump selling a strong report on economic growth in the second quarter today. Let's bring in our panel to talk about it. Jason Riley from the Wall Street Journal and the Manhattan Institute, A.B. Stoddard of Real Clear Politics, and Molly Hemingway from The Federalist. Well, Jason, 4.1% is a great number, but there seems to be a difference of opinion among experts about whether, on the one hand, this is sustainable or whether it is something of a blip or an aberration because there was a surge of exports, people trying to get in under the wire from the president's tariffs taking effect. Where do you come down on this?
Well, no one can argue that it is not a remarkable number. And you cut taxes, you reduce regulations, and this is what happens when you release the animal spirits of the U.S. economy. It happened under JFK and Reagan and George W. Bush, and it's happening again, so there's no surprise there. I don't know if the 4% growth is sustainable. Probably not, but I could see 3% being sustainable for a period of time based on what we've seen so far. And also what's impressive here is not only the pace of growth, Chris, it's how broad these effects are being felt throughout all these different demographic groups. Women, teenagers, blacks, Hispanics, people that had left the workforce are coming back. People are changing jobs. And this churn is a healthy indication that, that things are going very well and will eventually, I think, lead to the wage growth that we want to see.
A.B., it seems, you look at the news this week, that the economy, which we always knew was going to be a big issue in the midterms, is going to be an even bigger issue in the midterms. How good would it be for House Republicans trying to hold on to control of that body if you had, if not 4%, 3% going into the third quarter and early into the fourth quarter of this year before the midterms? And conversely, how much of a drag would it be for them if the tariffs and the trade war and rising prices and jobs are a drag on the economy?
That's the unknown is the trade war and the effects of the tariffs. If you look at the numbers coming in for the next quarter, it doesn't matter if they drop. They'll be so close to the midterm elections that this is the narrative that's going to stick. 4.1. All of the strong indicators that Jason mentioned across the board, a broad growth and expansion. So that is really great for President Trump out on the campaign trail, stumping for Republicans, and it's great for Republicans. So are the right track numbers, which are better than they've been in many, many years. This is something that the incumbent party that's set to lose seats in a midterm when their president is in power doesn't usually enjoy. The problem is those tariffs. That is the wild card. And that is already having such consequences that threatens to cut into all this buoyancy that really unfortunately could become the overall headline about the economy.
Molly, let's turn to the other big story today, and that is the Michael Cohen story and the contention that he is now making that President Trump knew about the Trump Tower meeting in June of 2016. Despite his denials, President Trump, this, of course, was the meeting in which this Russian lawyer with ties to the Kremlin said that she had dirt, and Don Jr., the president's son, said, "I love it," and had the meeting, and nothing came out of it. President Trump's current lead lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, went after Michael Cohen today with guns blazing. Take a look.
Number one, he lied to people about taping them, both the president and other people. And not only that, he went to subterfuge in order to do it, like a whole little game, which shows how pathological he is.
So, Molly, how big a development?
I'm not sure how big of a development it is. The sourcing is, once again, kind of anonymous here about Michael Cohen's claim. It contradicts his own testimony that he gave to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, where he said he never saw anything of any inappropriate meddling between the president and Russia. And then there's the other issue of just how significant it would be even if it were true. You know, if you really do care about a candidate in a political election working with foreigners to dig up dirt, you really do have an example of that with Hillary Clinton. She secretly hired a foreign spy who got information from Russian Kremlin operatives and then fed that back into the campaign, into the Again, we keep on hearing there's going to be some explosive bombshell that's going to take Donald Trump down and prove treasonous collusion with Russia. If this is the best they've got, I don't think it's that much.
Well, of course, A.B., we don't know if it's the best they got. It seems to me that even the meeting is a long way from collusion. You could argue that American political candidate, his team, should call the FBI instead of meeting with a Russian. But when you're told we got some dirt on your opponent and you have a meeting, that's not collusion, is it?
Well, I'm going to leave it to someone else, like Bob Mueller and Republicans and Democrats in Congress, to decide what collusion is, which is basically ostensibly not a crime, but then it could verge into conspiracy, at which point it would be an impeachable offense, and we have to have all the final details, and we don't. I do think that Michael Cohen is not a credible source. I think Donald Trump's word is not credible. I think Rudy Giuliani's word has proven not credible, and so I'm not going to believe any of them until I find out what the facts are. There is a blocked phone call in Don Jr.'s phone records that everyone obsesses about that Mueller would have access to. They've asked him in the past, does your father have a blocked phone? Is that the person you called about the meeting? And he says he doesn't know. We're going to have to wait for someone who actually knows. I don't really listen to any of them with great hope. I mean, I don't think that they're believable.
Jason, it seems to me the real story here is just the fact that it seems increasingly, both with this story, with the release earlier this week of that snippet of a conversation between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, it seems more and more likely that he's going to turn state's evidence, that he's going to become a cooperating witness for Robert Mueller in his investigation, and to have your personal lawyer and your fixer now go to the other side can't be helpful.
And this breaks on top of what we already knew about misleading statements coming out of the administration about this meeting regarding the statement that Donald Trump dictated to his son. He said he didn't, and his lawyers turned around and said, yes, he did do that. So I agree with A.B. There are a number of people making statements here that in the past have proved proven to be less than credible sources.
Yeah, the only point I'd make in all of this, and I don't by any means say that I think politicians should lie, but lying to the New York Times, as they may have, I mean, the worst you could say about Donald Trump is that he lied to the New York Times when he said he didn't know about the meeting in advance. Well, it's not a crime.
Sure. At the end of the day, I think this is, on some level, a father trying to protect his son. And we can all understand that and empathize with it. The problem is that he may be making matters worse here without just coming clean.
Real quickly, because we're going to get into the lightning round.
Lying really is a problem, but we were promised treasonous collusion with Russia to steal an election. And lying is a bad thing, and the White House should not have done it. But we don't have the evidence supporting this collusion theory that we have been fed for 2 years straight.
And you're not going to get a legal case, or, you know, if you lie to the special prosecutor, that's a problem. You lie to the New York Times, you shouldn't do it. Next up, the Friday lightning round, midterm elections, North Korea plus Witt.
Give me the top 25 Congress people that are, you know, could go either way, and I want to go out and campaign for those people. I am going to work very hard. I'll go 6 or 7 days a week when we're 60 days out, and I will be campaigning for all of these great people that do have a difficult race, and we think we're going to bring them over the line.
President Trump telling Sean Hannity today he will go all in this fall to help Republicans hold on to the House in November. But not all the signs are positive, and we're back now with our panel for the Friday lightning round. The respected Cook Political Report is out with a new look today at the midterms that bodes pretty well for Democrats. Let's put up these numbers on the screen. It turns out Republicans are defending 42 open seats where the Republican incumbent is either retired or moving on to another job. 42 open seats. That's the highest since at least 1930. 8 of those seats are in districts that voted for Clinton over Trump in 2016. And in cases where the president's party over the years is defending an open seat 2 years after the president failed to carry that district, the party is over 23. It's a little complicated, but it basically means if you've got an open seat and it voted for the opponent the 2 years before, not good for that party. What do you make of all of this?
We know from polling Trump remains very popular among Republicans, but he's not on the ballot in November. And the whole question is whether he can transfer that popularity to the people who are running. And one of the problems Trump has is that he's doing poorly among independents, much more poorly than he was before. 58% now disapprove of him. This midterm election is probably going to be won or lost in the suburbs and rural areas, and those independent votes are going to matter.
AB, there was a period of time, I think recently, where we had a sense, well, gee, maybe the blue wave wasn't going to happen. Now there seems to be a counter-argument it is.
Well, I have news for the president. And in those rough races, those candidates, those Republicans don't want him to come to their districts, and they're not going to welcome him there. He can help turn out some voters in some Senate races, maybe against the Democrats for the incumbents or the Republican challenger in states where he's very popular, but he can't go to the marginal districts. The polling shows that a strong majority of Americans favor a Democratic majority. That doesn't mean they're going to get in the car and they're going to vote. It's all about who mobilizes and all about who turns out.
All right, I'm going to turn to another subject because we are tight in time on the lightning round. Following the Trump-Kim summit, North Korea has turned over what it says are the remains of 55 servicemen who have been missing since the Korean War that are being returned and are on their way back to the United States. President Trump says this is a new sign of the new relationship between North Korea and the U.S. Here he is today.
I want to thank Chairman Kim in front of the media for fulfilling a promise that he made to me, and I'm sure that he will continue to fulfill that promise as they search and search and search.
Molly, how significant is this development, the return of these servicemen, in terms of the relationship?
This is an unalloyed good, and these families who have been wanting these remains returned have every reason to be happy. North Korea has a lot more to do to restore good relations, and every step of the way needs to be verified, and we need to start seeing much more from them.
All right, very quick, winner and loser of the week.
My winner is David Nunes and the other House Republicans that have been critical of the FBI surveillance request. Now that we've seen that request, it does look like the FBI was relying on that Steele dossier more than they let on.
Loser?
My loser is Facebook, whose market value fell by $100 billion in one day.
$1 billion is that's a rounding error. AB, winner.
Winner, Bret Baier, free press hero, who had to educate and clarify on Twitter for people the other night that it's not about when you align yourself with the other members of the media in access to the president. It's not about coverage, it's about access. Loser is Don Blankenship. Love him, don't want him to go away. He's trying to elect Senator Manchin again in the fall, but he tried to get back on the ballot after losing the primary on the Constitution Party and the Secretary of State